This is my old membrane keyboard, and it's currently pretty nasty. The spacebar sounds and it just all round sounds pretty bad. Now that dust is gone, we can get to work, hopefully making this thing sound better. I don't believe these keycaps are interchangeable, so we're stuck with these cheap black ones that look like they've been spray painted. And yeah, it looks like the paint missed the lower half of the keycaps. But before I start modding, let's take a quick listen to the stock sound test. As you can hear from the sound test, by far the worst parts of this board were the larger keys, such as the spacebar and enter key, because the stabilizers were just super rattly. The spacebar was pretty difficult to remove, and I was a little worried I was going to break it because of the force I had to use to remove the key. To my surprise, the stabilizer wires did have a little bit of grease on them, but it wasn't doing much of a job of reducing rattle. So once the wire had been removed, I took some thick grease and coated all the contact areas. As well as greasing the contact areas, I also coated the wire in grease just to reduce as much rattle as possible. There isn't much you can do on the inside of membrane keyboards to reduce hollowness, but the keys do have these gaps on the stems which I do want to fill, and I think I found a pretty cheap solution. Yep, that's right, Nerf bullets. Actually they're cheap replicas. But I only need them for the foam, so it doesn't really matter. Now my thought process here is to cut them into small pieces and push them into the stems to reduce that hollow void, and to hopefully give a richer, more whole sound to the keys. For the base of the spacebar, I first want to remove the springs, as they're just there to add some extra weight and just add to the rattly sound. Membrane keyboards don't come lubed, but they do have contact surfaces, same as mechanical keyboard switches. So in theory, adding lube should improve the sound and hopefully make the keys feel less scratchy. I took some Krytox 205 grade 0 and applied a thin coating to the inside of the membrane switch. I've never modded a membrane keyboard before, and in case any of you are following along, don't do what I just did, because yeah. It turns out that the stabilizer wire was meant to go underneath the plastic base clip thing, and when put back together properly it all works fine. Granted, it's not as good as a tuned mechanical keyboard spacebar, but it's a significant upgrade to how the spacebar sounded originally. With the spacebar modded and sounding good, I'm going to go ahead and apply the same mods to the rest of the larger keys. As some of you may have noticed, this board is still a little dusty. It'll be nice and clean for the final test, as I do have a new air duster arriving soon. It's just not here yet, so I'm currently stuck using a brush. The next logical step would seem to be to open up the case and add foam or some other dampener to reduce hollowness, as is often done with mechanical keyboards. But due to the design of membrane keyboards, there just isn't that much room inside. Okay, I can't procrastinate any longer, we're moving on to the keycaps. Removing the keycaps is pretty annoying. They are attached super firmly and went flying everywhere. Once all the keycaps are off, I'm going to give them a quick wash, because there's a reason the dust didn't come off earlier. It wasn't dust. All the keycaps are removed. Yep, it took ages. Long enough that my air duster arrived. Wow, that's quite powerful. Membrane keyboards are known for being mushy, and this is because they have rubber domes that compress to actuate the switch, so you don't get a solid bottom out like you do with a mechanical keyboard switch. This makes them cheaper and easier to manufacture, which is why they are normally popular. And hey, this keyboard only costs $16, so I'll stick some Amazon links below if you want to pick it up. When lubing the switches, I first started by lubing the base as shown earlier, but after taking a closer look at the keycaps, they have rails down the edges, which are the actual points of contact, not the sides as I originally thought. Because of this, I put a thin coating of lube down each corner, rather than all over the sides. With that said, let's get the keycaps modded. Constantly looking at these keycaps and their awful paint made me come up with a pretty genius plan. I'll just take some paint and paint them myself. The paint was difficult to get open. It had basically set rock solid and fused to the lid, so I got some new paint. With the plan already off to a bad start, I painted the inside of the keycap, and after a couple of layers of paint, it looked absolutely no different. Yeah. In the process of painting, I'd managed to get paint on my finger, which spread like everywhere, and somehow I didn't notice. Including on my keycaps when typing, so subscribe so I can get some new keycaps. With all the mods now completed, let's take a listen to the sound tests. don't know how much of that the mic picked up, but the modded keycaps sound and feel slightly less scratchy, and definitely have a lower pitch, making the keyboard sound pretty muted overall, and is actually now really quiet to type on. One thing to note that I've just noticed is that the foam on the inside of the keycaps does block some of the light from the LEDs. After the issue with the paint earlier, I got some water and soap and managed after scrubbing to remove the paint from the keycaps, so it's all good now.